to the Holistic Compilation Conference. I'm Dr. Jeff Grognet, and with me is Michael Daly. And Michael has been working with animals for over 20 years as a veterinary technician. He's also been certified in canine as a canine massage therapist for a dozen years. And for the last couple of years, he's a certified holistic pet health coach, working with a very good friend of mine, Dr. Ruth Roberts. And so what he's doing is he's working with veterinarians all over the country. And the hospitals that they represent are emergency hospitals, regular hospitals, holistic hospitals, you name it. The key is, and his goal is to educate clients. And so that way they can figure out how to feed their animals at home rather than feeding commercial food. And that way you can make the best decisions. And he's also trying to bridge the gap between the pet health coaches and veterinarians worldwide. So he's got a great mission. There's lots of stuff happening here, and it's a very vibrant community he belongs to. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Now it sounds exhausting, and I don't want to do any of it.
Now we're gonna keep you going. I'm gonna drill you on this one.
Gosh.
Whenever in practice, whenever I told people, hey, why don't you make some of your own food? Quite often we just sort of got this, okay,
Right.
like a blank stare, and there's no guidelines. They don't have a route to follow. That's the problem, right? And you're here to break that whole thought pattern, okay? And so what do you want to tell us about a diet they can make themselves?
Well, so for a lot of the years as a vet technician, I actually worked with Dr. Roberts. And to be perfectly honest with you, when I first started working with her, in 2011, I had gone from working at practices that were all basic, like your typical Western practices where we were all selling, the prescription diet. I was so excited about prescription diets when they would come in for the lunch and learns that I wanted to be a representative. I was like, oh, this is amazing. The way they sold it, the way they made it sound. And then I started working with Dr. Roberts, and she had the original Crockpet Diet at the time. And I was like, oh gosh, it's one of those vets, And so I always like to tell people that when I first kind of talk about it, because I was definitely someone as a vet tech that was had the whole prescription diet story drilled in me.
Sure, you were trained that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And so as I worked with her and saw this diet implemented, I saw the most incredible changes I've ever seen in my years as a vet tech. I think the number one thing that really hit me were skin issues, just skin issues in general, especially here in the South. It was, I worked at so many practices where it was just, oh, skin issue, medication, 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 medication. It's better, comes back not better, medication, medication, that whole just cycle. And so when I saw just the change in diet, change a cat and dog's personality, skin, everything, I was sold. I was sold on home cooking from now on.
Yeah, and I saw it in practice myself, And the thing is, I can say this comfortably. I'm older than you. I got trained earlier than you, and yeah, the ideal food was a complete and balanced one. Example: green a dog chow. Wow, that's great stuff. No, it's not. So, and it takes a lot of time because the education is formidable, ongoing, and it just keeps going in that mantra that the commercial foods are so much better in all kinds of ways over anything that you could do at home.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that was that was one of the hardest sells when she started opening when she opened the practice and started selling and promoting the home cooking. She had a lot of fight back from a lot of different veterinarians, a lot of different clients, because we have to get them out of their brain that they can do this, and so it was difficult. And the good thing is that I think as a vet tech, I could kind of tell that story and say, listen, I know that this sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. And one of the first selling points that she had was that you basically can throw all these ingredients. You can be the laziest cook in the world, throw them onto a crock pot, put the lid on and cook it, and you're good to go. And that would switch people over pretty well.
Yeah. And in other words, keep it simple.
Right.
And I like the KISS thing. Keep it simple, smart person.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, she developed this entire system. It was based on a crock pot, which she called a Crockpet, which very smart, very smart. But the key is, okay, so if I want to cook for my dog, as in, hey, I've got my dog over here. I just need to I need some simple directions, Mike. What are they?
So yeah, so it's really basic. So the entire the diet itself is based through traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, and so it's about being cooked food. So in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, we have the stomach, which is considered the spleen, and the spleen's job is to transform food into gu qi, which is the essence of life. And so for the spleen to do that properly, it needs to be cooked. And so it's a really easy recipe. It's just your basic, proteins, vegetables, and then slow burning carbohydrate like beans, and then basically throw them into a pot. So the recipe itself is about a half a pound of beans. So you'd say like black beans, 3 pounds of a protein, so like pork, 4 cups of an in-season vegetable. So if it was, a lot of times it's windfall or anything like that, we do like butternut squash, 3 cups of a leafy green vegetable, because leafy greens help the liver detoxify. So that would be bok choy, kale, spinach. And then you're going to add in a couple of herbs to help resolve stagnation. So stagnation in Chinese medicine is we have channels that flow through our body. I always like to call qi the force in Star Wars. So the force flows through those channels. When there's a blockage in those channels, it's called stagnation. So these herbs help resolve that stagnation. So you have mustard, turmeric, garlic, and garlic is not toxic, it's dose dependent. And then you're going to add in a couple of cups of water, put it on a crock pot, turn it on low, let it cook for 8 hours, and you're good to go.
That's it?
That's it. Once it's cooked, once it's cooked, you take you will use an immersion blender. You blender it up. Once it cools down, then you're going to add in some healthy fats. So like 6 tablespoons of avocado oil or olive oil. And then each batch you basically rotate.
Okay. So you're not feeding the same food every day then?
No, well, it's usually rotate per batch.
So yeah, that's what I mean. You're going to the next batch is going to be different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So usually when people do the recipe at first, they'll get the template and they'll, and I tell people it's okay. The first time you do it, you're going to be super scared, super nervous. You want to get everything right. So it does take some time to do the first couple of recipes. By the time you'll be measuring perfect cups of kale, perfect cups of this and that. By the time you're done and have done it more than a dozen times, you'll be just doing handfuls. Exactly.
Yeah, I can see that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of like someone in their 20s trying to figure out how to make a pasta sauce for their Italian grandmother or something like that, right? And you're following it exactly,
right.
And then you put your own spin on it once you figured out how to do this stuff, and you just end up making this mush of stuff. It still tastes good. It works.
Absolutely.
Right?
And then I do have to mention the key ingredient, and this should really honestly be for everything, and is a multivitamin. So a multivitamin, the holistic total body support, is one that Dr. Roberts invented, made with glandular materials, and that is to help balance out the diet. So her thought with a multivitamin is that most of the nutrients in the soil had already been depleted. And so having a multivitamin helps round out your daily nutrition.
Okay. One of the criticisms we get of raw diets, home cooked diets, whatever, is the minerals in there, calcium and such.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing in this diet to make that work?
So you do add in calcium to it to help balance out the phosphorus bone ratio, and then kelp for iodine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are adding those minerals in there, so we don't end up with a deficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're asking me off the top of my head. I'm trying.
Okay.
Sure, I can whip this out of the top of my head.
You're doing good. You're good. All the things you mentioned, and you're very specific with this, is you're not dealing with a starchy component, right?
No.
You're not adding corn, rice, wheat. Name your poison that way. So is there a reason for that, Michael?
Well, the diet is geared towards being an anti-inflammatory diet. So, and that is the
Okay.
reason. So, and and this is, as a holistic pet health coach, this is a lot of the stuff that I've been learning just from working with Dr. Roberts and then doing this and learning, from people like you and things like that is the idea of, really there's the diet is made, which I think this can be sort of it's a wonderful thing, but at the same time, for a lot of people, a very scary thing, because the diet is designed to be changed for specific dog specific needs. So, for example, my dog Luna is a golden retriever. She was overweight when I got her. And so I had her on a completely no carb version of the Crockpet diet. She lost the weight. I had to have her add weight on. So, I had to increase the oil per serving. I had to add a little bit of carbohydrates per serving because that's her energy level. So it does vary, but most of the time I keep all the diets anti-inflammatory.
Okay. And in this case, the beans is substitute for the carbs.
Yes.
That's how you're doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like you say, the anti-inflammatory effect, I mean, it's based partly on the Chinese principles, but from the strictly Western side, also, you're not feeding a ton of corn, which has all the high omega-6s, that are going to mess things up, right? So
Right. Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah, so you're avoiding that. So when you're doing this, like say, I mean, obviously a batch that you do in a slow cooker is going to feed different sized dogs for different lengths of time, right?
Right.
So you may be doing it every second day, or what depends how many mouths you have to feed.
Exactly. Yeah. And it also depends on the pet's activity level, So if we have an older dog that isn't as active as much, you can feed less. Luna gets a batch of the Crockpet diet without any carbohydrates makes about eight to 9 cups. So we're probably making a batch for her every week. And there's and the thing with the diet is that there's different ways to cook it. It doesn't just have to be a crock pot. You can use an Instapot. I'm a big Instapotter. I have 4 Instapots that I use.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I get them at Goodwill and I make them so I can do 4 batches in a day and have it freeze it and have it all set for her. And I also make it for my cat, so I make it for him as well. You can use a roaster oven, so you can actually triple the batch, or roasting pans, you can triple the batch. A lot of people do that. So there's lots of different ways you can cook it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So you introduced the other species right there. So let's delve into that for a moment. So, I mean, here you've created a diet for your dog, which has all these veggies, all this stuff in there. What's the difference when we morph into a cat land?
So cats are picky. Cats are very, very picky. And, transitioning a cat from, especially specifically a kibble diet, as, I love the explanation of when I was watching one of your videos talking about, there's that popcorn stuff you were talking about.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I always say it's like getting a cat. I always say it's getting a kid off of Captain Crunch to like a healthy meal. So it can be a little bit of a harder sell. So there is a starter cat recipe that is a little less than the vegetables, since cats are so picky about leafy green vegetables, a little higher on picking of butternut squash, which is sweet. Carrots are more sweet. So we're trying to keep that sweetness in the diet. Absolutely no grains for a cat. And then maybe a little bit more fat in the diet. So that's really, and then again, the holistic total body support for taurine.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So with the cats, then, I mean, one of the things I have using cats lots of times when they have constipation is a
Yes.
little bit of canned pumpkin. You know, you can go buy a can of it and give them a tablespoon. And lots of cats like that,
Hmm.
you know. And so you're like with the squash you're putting in, like you say, it's a little bit sweet. So
Yeah.
it's the same idea, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then, I mean, just in general, if you have a cat that's constipated, getting them over to a wet diet, the more hydrated they are, the less possibilities of them being constipated. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's a big push for constipated cats. Get them away from no dry food shall pass thy lips. That's the way it should be, right?
exactly.
But the also, like you say, the taurine, that's always a sticking point for cats, you know.
Yes.
And so you have to make sure you're adding the taurine. So you can't make a batch that is high meat for your dog and say, oh, this will work for the cat too.
Right.
You've got to add the taurine. You can add the taurine and give it to both dogs and cats.
Mhm. Yes,
No,
absolutely.
no harm there. Okay, just
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, but that's the type that little type of fact is something that really inhibits people from jumping into making their own food
Hmm.
because the thing that's we're told a lot, and this is by the pet food manufacturers, and I'm going to put it right on them because they will bring up cases saying, hey, you know, these dogs or cats were fed these deficient diets and then they got sick and showed all this, right? And what they don't show, this is the other side of that whole coin, is they don't show the videos showing all these sick dogs and cats because they managed to get a commercial food that was toxic because of too much vitamin D.
Absolutely, yeah. And then you
Okay.
have, and you have these commercial diets that are, they claim to be so balanced, but basically they're eating hamburger buns, hamburger and rice, and then some cheap multivitamin thrown in there for cost effectiveness. Is
Yeah.
that really balanced?
Yeah. No,
That's it.
that's the thing. The balance goes out the window. There was I don't know if you know this one, Michael. In Australia, they had cats that were dying of heart disease real quick, and it turns out that the commercial food produced by a couple of companies, because they all use the same supplement, was deficient in the taurine.
Uh,
And bingo, and it took them a while to figure it out. You know,
right.
same thing with the melamine one scare we had in North America, right?
Right, yeah. And the whole
So
idea of the grain-free
same
diet.
same idea. So the point with all that with that background, there's a lot of good reasons to make your own food because that way you know what's in it
Mhm.
and the improved health outcome.
Absolutely. And when you know what's in it, then you're able to adjust to help your pet's specific need.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the thing I talk about. I don't feed a cooked food. Sorry, sorry about that. To our dog, so he gets a raw food.
Mhm.
But and just going with matching the patient, so to speak. His bowel movements were hard and dry. So
Mm.
okay, so we added some. So we mashed up some veggies, nice green ones. Put that in there, and boom, he's got larger bowel movements. They're firm, but they're nice and soft. They're moist.
Mhm.
Bingo. That is watching your pet,
Yes.
and especially cats, because cats you can do the same thing. And as if they're having trouble having a bowel movement, and I had a case just last week, a lady who has her cat went to the litter box, tried to poop, and as it came out, it pooped about 3 or 4 feet away.
Mm.
It's an old cat, right? So the reason it's doing that is because it's trying, but it just doesn't have the strength to get the poop out.
Right.
Bingo.
Mhm.
That's what you call a squash deficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I have a client right now that I was so excited because his cat went right to the Crockpet diet like that. And I was so happy because it is sometimes a slow transition. And which having the conversation with him, his stools were getting harder. And so he was on the starter recipe, which is a little less leafy greens. So we moved him over to the main recipe to get more vegetables in there. And so we're gonna watch how he does, see how he's doing, and go from there. So, and that's the thing. I think that people, you know, it, it's more convenient for someone to do 1 cup here, 1 cup here, and walk away and not worry about it. but I think that we're more and more just being more aware of our pets. And that's sort of how we have to act with the food. How is this food affecting my pet? What can I change in this diet to make my pet feel better? How can I prevent instead of trying to fix, prevent the issue from happening before an issue happens and I got to give them a pill. So,
yeah. So got two questions for you. One is, if we want to I want to make the Crockpet diet right now for my dog or cat. And how do I do a transition?
So definitely slowly.
Okay.
Transition everything slowly. So usually start at about 20% of the diet of the food introduced be Crockpet and the rest be the other food they were eating. And then I always say over a 2-week period, do a full transition depending on the pet. So most pets are fine in 3 to 4 days, but some pets, who have more sensitive stomachs may take a longer time to transition over. So,
Okay. Okay.
mhm,
So take your time, but base it on the pet in front of you. Okay.
mhm.
And then the other side is, I'm feeding commercial food, and I'm still worried. So can we mix the two, like Crockpet diet and commercial, like putting the spoonful on every meal or something like that?
Absolutely. If you want to do that, listen, if I can get someone just to do it that is so afraid to start doing it, let's start with a spoonful of it, some dry food, and then get you comfortable and see if we can transition over to fully. So I think once people see, I think people will get some benefit seen from just a little bit of the real food in their dog's diet. I mean, I had a client that and it still sometimes really amazes me when I see it. I have a client that's a friend, and she was on a commercial diet, and I switched, and she has an older pointer, 12 years old. Had some inflammation in the shoulder, was limping, very oily skin, very malaise, I would say. And so we switched her over to Crockpet diet. Dog lost some weight, limp went away, skin looked great, more energy. And I was making the food for her. And so I went to go pet sit for her, and I got to the house and she had the bag of commercial food. And I was like, what is that? And she goes, oh, we ran out of the diet. I didn't want to bother you. And her dog was back to what it was before: overweight, oily skin, sad. And so I'm like, well, this dog is getting, as far as I know, this dog is getting the Crockpet diet. And so started making the food for her. Literally a day later, the dog was like a puppy again, like a puppy. That's what amazes me about it. That's why I'm so like jumping up and down, barking and running around. I've known this dog for a while before she finally transitioned over. So it just the real food. It can be raw food, it can be cooked food, just something real,
I totally agree. I've had one client who decided to cook her own food, and she did wanted to do a transition, and to do it slowly. And her story was great, because she got a spoonful of the food, put it on the dry food, and then so the dog ate it all. Okay, I like this, right? Next time she puts the spoon down, the dog comes in, eats everything except the dry food, and then is looking up at her going, excuse me, we got a problem here.
I know. That was the thing too, because she had a younger dog too, and I could just tell they were looking at me like, "Do you see what we're eating now? Can you fix this, please?"
Yeah. So, yeah. But the thing is, there's so much uh, backstepping done by veterinarians when we talk about making your own food. It's like it's a blasphemy. And I mean, I was told, coming out of vet school, only put 10% of the food as now I can call it real food. They call it table scraps back then, but only put 10% in because we were going to mess up the balance in that wonderful commercial food.
Oh, yeah.
Comment
Yeah.
comment on that?
I mean, is commercial food really balanced? So it's balanced to meet minimum AFCO requirements, which minimum AFCO requirements for protein is 18%. Is that necessarily the correct amount of protein that a pet should have, especially when dry food is so overcooked and made with things like beaks and corn and feathers. I don't really find that necessarily the most balanced diet out there.
Yeah. And the point is all commercial foods, because of the economics, are based on minimums.
Right.
Okay. So, and that's the whole point. They're made so that they just scrape by getting above those numbers. I always say 20% protein for dogs, 30% for cats, roughly, and all they have to do is meet that.
Yes, absolutely.
Chemically, that's the kicker. They don't need to meet it nutritionally, just on a chemical analysis basis, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's, and I equate a lot of this to human medicine, really. I just, I think about my mom who, I watched, go from, she broke her hip and then sort of like was led down the path of eventually passing away. And just the diets that they fed in hospitals was, oh, she's losing weight, so we got to give her high carbohydrates and no protein. And so it's just this horrible balance of muscle loss and sugar gain. I'm like, how is this healthy? So, and I sort of equate a lot of that to when talking to my clients with their animals, especially as they get older.
Yeah, and the recommendation with senior dogs and cats is to reduce the protein as they get older.
Mhm.
And as they call it, is very well known in cats is protein cachexia.
Mhm.
Where they just start shriveling away, losing their muscle because
Yeah.
they're not taking enough in. They're not absorbing it. That's the
Nope.
problem.
And my cat has been eating the Crockpet diet. He'll eat high quality food if he is picky, but mostly the Crockpet diet. He's 17 and I've had his blood work done twice this year, and liver and kidney functions are, vets are actually astounded at as well as he's doing. So
Good.
high protein diet is not affecting my 17-year-old cat,
No,
so.
no, no. Getting them on their real food extends their lifespan, and as another speaker I have, their health span.
Right.
Okay?
Mhm.
So it just keeps them going, and they get there better, for
Right.
sure.
And I also feel like I have to say that, like, and this is sort of what sort of my goal was talking about, is really trying to bridge that gap between veterinarians and what we do as holistic pet health coaches. Because I've worked with vets, I've worked with vets for, 20 years, over 20 different veterinarians. And, veterinarians don't go into becoming veterinarians because they hate dogs and cats. They love them. I've sat crying with veterinarians who couldn't figure out what they could do for a pet, and granted, yeah, I worked with a couple of vets that were awful, but like, 98% of the veterinarians I've worked with, they love animals and they want to do what's best for them. And I keep the more and more, I just think we have to keep that frame of mind that it's, I feel like a lot of times on my side, we sort of villainize veterinarians. And I don't think that's helpful to have the conversation with them, because a lot of veterinarians I've had conversations with, they're just like, yeah, I keep hearing about it, but I'm terrified to do. I'm terrified, so they just need,
Yeah.
to be like, well, listen, this is what it is. Let me show you, to really, that's my goal, is to really try to make that connection as best as I can.
And that's a great goal. Yeah. So eventually, we're going to get this information out to the masses being the veterinarians who haven't got it yet.
Mhm.
And they're all relying on their education from the pet food manufacturers. So we've got to interject this other stuff so they can really see what is possible.
Right. And I know, like, veterinarians that, before, like, all the prescription diets that were selling in practices, like you had to basically in school design a diet for a pet.
Mhm.
It wasn't just about learning the prescription diets. Like, you had to physically design a diet for a pet. And I wish that was, you know, still around.
Yeah, but unfortunately, if you're doing it in school, then you're going to be creating a diet that mimics the commercial foods that are out there.
Right. Right.
And I'll put this note: if you go and get recipes on the internet, you're going to find a whole lot of recipes that are based on mimicking the high corn, little protein, filler filled foods, right? And very simply, we can do a whole lot better than
Absolutely.
that. And you've got it. You've got it with the Crockpet. So, okay.
Good. Best I can.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Michael?
No, just you know, it's like I said, I worked with Dr. Roberts, and that's the thing. I'm Dr. Roberts is somebody that just came up with this diet. This diet has been used in practice. That's what I tell people all the time to make them feel better. I have seen this diet used in clinic since 2009. It's been used in clinic and have only seen the most amazing results with it. So
Yeah. Yeah. And the big part about it is you're not going to kill your pet by doing it this way.
no.
Because some people think that if they stray into this uncharted world, my God, we're going to make a mistake. They're not going to die. And think of the resilience of us. There are people out there, believe it or not, that have McDonald's every day.
Exactly.
And they may not be in the best health, but they haven't died yet.
Exactly. That's
Okay.
that's a brilliant point.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. So anyway, thank you very much for being on board, Michael.
Thank you.
You have something set up with Dr. Ruth regarding an ebook available?
Yeah, so it's actually her ebook where it goes into a really history of where the Crockpet diet came from, why she invented it. It goes more specifically on the way that she designed it and what each food group means. And so it's just a lot more information on it for you.
Great. Okay, so if anyone wants that, I've got the address below the webinar. So snatch it up, and that way you can get some information from Dr. Ruth. But thank you for being on board, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. It's been a lot of fun. And hopefully you can see that feeding your dog, feeding your cat isn't rocket science. It's not that hard. And all you got to do is get some stuff and throw it in a crock pot. Follow his recipe, kind of, sort of. Okay.
That's still even better.
Yeah, yeah. And the main thing with it is that, and this is the key, dermatologists, when they're dealing with a dog that has severe allergies, what they will tell people is feed pork and pinto beans. And the reason they do that is because it's two ingredients that generally dogs haven't had before. So they're doing a test to see if the dog can take that food. This is the key. They tell them to do that for 2 months. They do not mention anything in the way of adding supplements, oils, or anything else to that. It's strictly a case of feed these two ingredients and let's see what happens. The point is, you can do that, and so you could feed Michael's diet without supplements for the same length of time, and you're not going to run into trouble. Eventually, yeah, you want to fix it, okay? But the thing is, there's lots of leeway here, and our animals have resilience, and they will not die from it. Okay? So with that, thank you very much, Michael. And we'll catch the rest of you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next webinar.